Alors, bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular public meeting of the Dieppe City Council on this October 26th. Great evening for all of us. We will receive the presentation from our administrators on the budget for the year 2021. That will be most of the deliberation for tonight. Without any further delay, let's have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the wisdom to know the difference. Let's call the meeting to order. Confirmation of quorum by the clerk, and also conflict of interest if there's any. No conflict of interest has been received. So let's proceed immediately with the adoption of the agenda moved by Councilor Leblanc, seconded by Councilor Cormier. On the question, no question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Carried as presented. Without any further delay, we'll proceed with the presentations, inquiries, and petition. 7.1, inquiries by council members for the Kodiak Regional RCMP. So, I don't know who's with us. That is Jeanette. Hello, Mr. Jeanette. It's always a pleasure to hear you. I hasten to see you all again in person. Well, we can't wait to see you also. On that, any questions from the councilors for the RCMP? It seems that you will get away with it very easy. There's no question, it seems. So, let's say continue your good work. I just want to make a comment. We've had several problems and complaints about the speed on the Fox Creek Road. In the last 2 weeks, we've been present and we've been able to give a lot of traffic tickets, and we've added that in our regular yellow patrol as the other places, and also with the request from services elsewhere. Continue to share with us your information and the complaints from the citizens of Dieppe, and we'll do our best to solve all of that. Thank you very much for that information. I see a lot of smiles around the table. Obviously, they're not among those who were caught by the RCMP. That's encouraging. But we appreciate the effort, the added effort. Well, it continues to be a major challenge. Some people don't seem to understand the message. And in spite of the intensity that you bring to this, before the roads get too slippery, you'll catch them in the ditch. Have a good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll stay here. I have an interest at 10.2A. Okay, thanks. You'll find it very interesting. That being said, let's continue with the presentation of the budget. Good evening. The operating budget for 2021. Our preferred money man. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, and on Zoom, virtual, as well as the public in general, I hope. First of all, as you have been able to see, we are earlier than usual for the presentation of the budget at the request of the province. They want us to have the budget prepared and adopted 1 year ahead of schedule compared to last year. I want to thank all my colleagues, director, assistant director, for the work. They've worked very hard, double shift, to be able to prepare everything. So thank you as far as that goes. To bring you back in The first evening we had 2 weeks ago, we had the presentation on October 13th with the capital budget, my colleague, Mr. Steve Landry. And last week we had the external agency who came here. We're on the third evening. Tonight, it's the operating and sewer and water and the general budget. But first of all, we will go with the grants request with Mrs. Pauline Cormier from the recreational service, and then we'll go with the building renovation program presented by Remy Como, who's a specialist in building. If everything goes well, if there's not too many changes to be made, we should bring back in 2 weeks the last meeting to adopt the budget, the operating budget, and the capital budget. And lastly, we keep the last meeting of the year to transfer to the reserve. We keep that for the final meeting of the year. So I will leave the floor to Ms. Cormier. Mrs. Cormier, good evening and welcome. Good evening. Thank you. Let me share my mic for the presentation. And here, there, as we do every year, we present the grants to be for the organization, community organization, and the events, forthcoming events. The first slide, I wanted to make a summary of the grants in the middle of a pandemic, and then there's a policy L19 where our youth are participating. We've had $1,500, so 2,950 that we're asking this year. And we will use it before the end of December. We have the events policy L16 for all the festivals. The reduction is slightly higher, $65,250 out of 119,000 some odd dollars. The festival, I can't name them. If you have any question, you can answer them. The harvest, hubcap was not help. The fry, inspire. These are projects for public. The outside scene at 1604 at the Art Center, and projects like that. La Poquette was not held. Francophète will be held next week. The Salon du Livre, the book salon, will be held. And the other thing, TikTok, the international festival. Well, we've had two Atlantic Championship at the beginning of the year. Figure skating and speed skating were held. Is that okay? Any questions so far? No? Okay. The subsidies or grants to the community organization didn't change very much, $294,650. The probable budget for next year, that's what we're recommending. Our agreements with the municipal council, as you can see, there is an agreement for next year. The one that will finish is number 5 of 5 for the foundation of the Acadian Games. It's the last year of a 5-year agreement. We have policy L13, partnership with the associative sector. Santa Claus parade will be held. It will be at the Coliseum. People will drive through. The parents will go through and will see. And there will be some. We can receive 35 cars. So this will be held at the Moncton Coliseum. And there's always the parking at the St. Elson Church that we share in the winter months. And a lot of people use it. So It's a great agreement that we have with Santos Church. Policy L15 and the community group grants, the cadet, the Army Cadet 2400, Golden Age 2000, Boys and Girls 50,000, Gymnastic Club 14,000, and the Youth House of Dieppe 54,000. Following this policy, we have the Community Intervention Program 45,000, Pro Youth 4,000. It's an increase from what they were receiving before. And we're at $4,000 because it's costing more because it's a virtual walk. The App Scout 6,000 and the military veteran of the App 2,500, a total policy total $180,900. Policy L19, financial support for the youth group, and evaluation on requests at $4,500. So that policy, the total is $4,500. Policy L20, which are donation application, the food bank 2,000, Crime Stoppers 700, Radiothon 2,000, AIDS 1,500, and Nazareth House. New request. This is one that is recommended. We have $2,500, which is set aside for new requests. If you have any question on the policies for subsidies, any questions from the councillors? Starting with Mr. Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. What I find weird is that we don't subsidize anymore the music festival, and I'm told that it's because there's not a lot of activities happening in Dieppe. But let's look further. It services the youth of Dieppe. The activity may be more in Moncton, but they service Moncton Dieppe youth who are taking a music lesson. I think we should find a mean, whether it be as a new request or whatever it may be, find a way to answer that request for subsidy for that. Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify the question, the Greater Moncton Music Festival, for 2 years, we have a direct agreement with the event. We make a contribution on an agreement from what we're receiving. In exchange, it comes here on a yearly basis. Early next year, an agreement will probably be brought forward to the council if we ask or demand from them. It doesn't meet the policies. The council has considered an agreement. We had an exchange that was considered to be adequate. Thank you. I forgot that. Ms. Arsenault?
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Madame Cormier, la politique
Mrs. Cormier, Policy 15, Community Group,
ça continue aussi
and
deuxième
it continues on page 2.
cadet de l'armée.
We have the Army Cadet, Golden Age Club, Boys and Girls Club,
Les maisons des jeunes.
Gymnastic,
En dessous, on a
Youth House, and
maison
underneath
des jeunes.
we have Youth House. Oh, wrong page.
On a la maison des jeunes, 46 000 là.
We have $46,000 for Youth House,
Le total, c'est
and the total
80 000.
is that really 180,900 if we add everything?
Est-ce que l'addition est adéquate?
Is it properly added? Yes, is the answer. 185,400.
Non, c'est pas tellement une grosse différence.
It's not much of a difference. No, but thank you for letting me know.
Puis, la maison des jeunes de 46 000, ça, c'est
And the
pour les
46,000
travailleuses
for the
sociales.
youth house, that's to pay for the social worker. Yes, in the office there's the youth house. So the program, we make a check to the youth house, and part of it goes toward
Merci.
paying the social worker. Thank you very much. Mr. Boutier?
Juste une seconde.
Sorry.
Voilà.
There.
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
Thank you, Worship.
La question
The
s'adresse à Mme
question is for Ms. Cormier. It's more,
C'est une question générale d'information.
it's an information question. Do we have
Dans les diverses
much requests for subsidies and policies? Is there a lot of refusal? I don't know. Maybe 8 to 10 per year. It's on health, mental health, and education. Conferences in the University of Moncton. Well, we can't support them. We had them in our policy before, but it's been a long time now since they've been out of our policy. So, and that's the kind of policy that I turn down every year. Thank you. But in previous year, did we have a list of those that were given to or were turned down? If ever were, I would appreciate to have a list of those that are turned down. Thank you. Monsieur Brideau? Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Worship. Ms. Cormier, my question is the annual subsidy grant that we give to the Capitol Theatre, is it the same this year? Yes. We recommend $75,000. And we want to develop an agreement with the director of the Capitol Theatre. We'll bring it to the council for an approval. Was the information given to Ms. Rayward? I only said that we were recommending it, but I can confirm with her. The discussion are going on with Ms. Rayward because she sent me a message to ask me if an answer was given. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? No, it would seem there's none. Thank you for having shared the information with us, and we continue with grants for the events. They're being organized by our organization, the policy that was approved by its sports event. So we did not identify them here. We also have the annual events, which were in partnership, Francofat, Book Salon, Frigidi Festival, Inspire, Afro Hubcap International, Harvest, and Northrop Fry. So some those that are recommended by some events, I can give you a list if you so wish. Thank you. Question from the councillors. Comments. Ms. Arsenault. Thank you, Worship.
Dis-moi, Madame Cormier, je suis encore.
Excuse me, Ms. Cormier, but I'm still in these figures.
Moi, j'ai à peu près 202 000.
I have 202,000 by adding this.
C'est moi qui sais mal compter.
Am I wrong in my math or for the subsidies, for the grants? No, L15, the two amounts.
Par le montant total.
The total amount for 180,900. L15. The amounts that you have are the proper amounts.
Oui, madame. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. That's okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Anything else? No? Okay, let's continue. Wait. It brings us to the building renovation
Oui,
program.
bonsoir.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr.
Monsieur le
Cobo.
maire, membre des conseils.
Your
Donc,
worship,
ce soir, je vais vous présenter le programme de rénovation des
program
bâtiments.
of the
Donc, je vais
building
juste partager
renovation.
l'écran ici.
I will share my screen.
Donc, est-ce que vous voyez l'écran?
Do you see the screen?
Encore.
Not yet.
Et voilà.
There.
C'est parti.
Donc, c'est bon? Parfait.
Okay.
Donc,
We have
le programme de rénovation
So
des
program
bâtiments.
of the building renovation program.
Donc, le lien avec le plan stratégique pour
The
le programme de
link with the
rénovation. Donc, on
strategic
a
plan,
l'aménagement du territoire et
development
infrastructures
of
de
the
qualité. Donc, on
territory
veut
and
maintenir des
quality
infrastructures
infrastructure.
existantes en bon
Want
état.
to maintain the
Et aussi,
existing
on veut
infrastructure
optimiser les
in good
infrastructures
state, and we
existantes
want to
puis
improve the
éventuellement ajouter
existing
des nouvelles
and eventually add
infrastructures pour répondre aux
new
besoins
infrastructure to
futurs de la
meet the
municipalité.
needs within the municipality.
Donc, la façon
The way
qu'on décide
that we
où on va investir dans les
decide
bâtiments, on utilise l'indice de
what
condition
to
des
do, we
bâtiments.
use the
Donc, l'indice de
index
condition
of
des
building
bâtiments, ce qui fait qu'il
condition,
prend
the index
dans
of
toutes les
the
réparations qu'on a à faire dans les
condition with
bâtiments,
all the
dans les
repairs we have to make
qui sont dus à être faits,
that
on
have to
divise par
be
la
done,
valeur de nos bâtiments.
divide them by the
Donc, ce que ça nous
value of
donne
our building, what
en
it gives
chiffres pour la
us
municipalité.
figure-wise for
Donc,
the
nous, on a
municipality.
évalué 19 de nos bâtiments.
We've assessed
Dans les 19 bâtiments, ça n'inclut pas encore les
19
duplex et
does
non plus
not
la maison
include
Doiron.
duplex.
Donc, on
or
a
the
19 des
Doiron
plus gros
house.
bâtiments.
So 19
On
is
prend
our we think the
en
biggest
considération
building
pour
that
l'indice
we
tout de suite.
consider.
Donc, la valeur de nos
The
bâtiments
index, the value
est de
of our building is
66,7 millions.
$66.7 million.
Donc, présentement,
So
on a un
presently,
bon indice de condition des bâtiments
we
pour
didn't
2020.
have an
On est à
index for 2020.
1,14%.
We're at 1.14%.
Donc, ici, si on regarde pour les 10
So
prochaines
if we
années,
look for the
le
next 10
programme
years,
démontre qu'on aurait
program
7,3
shows
millions
that we would
en
have
rénovation
7.3 million
à faire dans
in
nos bâtiments.
renovation to be made.
Donc là,
to
si
our
on
building.
mettrait
So,
aucun argent dans les bâtiments,
If we were to
après 10
invest
ans,
no money
notre
in our
indice serait
building
rendu à
after 10 years,
11%.
the index
Donc,
would be up to
on prend le
18%.
7,3
So
divisé par le
take 7.3 divided by
66,7 millions.
66.7 million.
Donc, nous, on a
And it
décidé
gives 11.
de rester
So,
en dessous de 6%
We
pour l'indice de
want
condition
to
des bâtiments.
remain under 6% for the index, building index.
Donc là, si c'est une projection, si on
So this
ne
is
mettrait
a
aucun argent dans nos
projection if no
bâtiments,
money was
donc
invested in
la
our building
croissance à
at all.
partir de
So the
2024
growth
environ,
from
on serait
2024
déjà rendu au-dessus de
approximately.
notre cible. Donc
Yeah.
là, c'est
So
une détérioration des bâtiments puis l'indice augmente.
the improvement and the
Donc
index
ça, c'est
of the
pas le cas
building
parce qu'on met de l'argent
is
quand même
not
dans
the
nos
case
bâtiments.
because we put money in our buildings. I mean,
Donc,
it would
là,
never be the case. So
Donc, présentement, on investit
presently, we
350
invest
000 par année dans le programme de
$350,000 per
rénovation des
year
bâtiments.
in the building
Puis on a aussi un
renovation
autre
program,
programme qui est le
and
programme
within
de
that
remplacement des
program,
bâtiments qu'on
that
met
there is a building
254 000
replacement
par
program
année.
where we put
Donc, si on continue à investir ces
$254,000 per
montants-là,
year. If we continue
on
to invest those
serait encore
amounts
à
of money,
2,02%
we would still be at 2.02% in 2030.
Donc, ici, je vous montre un peu le
So
graphique
here
de
I
ce qu'on
show
est
you
présentement.
a chart
On est à
where we're at. We're at
1,14%.
1.14%
Donc, on continue à investir, puis on fait des
So if we
réparations au
keep
cours des années.
investing and we
Dans
repair
10
for
ans, on
years
serait
to
à
come,
2%.
in 10 years we'll be at 2%.
Et on est encore bon jusqu'à
And we're still good
2035.
until
Que là, on serait
2035.
au-dessus de
There
notre
we will
cible.
be
Donc,
above
on est en bonne posture
our
présentement.
estimated, so we're in a very good position.
Donc, comme j'ai mentionné, le
As I
budget
mentioned,
ne changerait pas pour
the budget
2021.
would not
Donc, il
change
demeurerait à
for
350
2021.
000
It
pour le
would
programme
stay at
de rénovation des bâtiments.
$350,000 for the building renovation
En fin
program.
d'année, cette
At
année,
the
on va
end
avoir
of this year,
330
we'll
000
have
en réserve.
$330,000 in reserve.
Un autre budget qu'on a, c'est un budget de remplacement pour les
Budget
bâtiments.
we have is a replacement
Donc ici, j'ai marqué
budget for the building. I've
254
put
000, mais c'était vraiment
254,000,
250
but
000
it's
de
really
budget. Donc, l'année prochaine, on
250,000
demande encore
budget next year.
250 000.
We're still asking
Ici, on n'a pas
250,000.
encore utilisé des
And
montants
we
du
have not yet
budget de remplacement des bâtiments. Donc, on a
the replacement.
712 000
We have
en réserve.
712,000 in reserve so far.
Donc, je vais vous parler un peu de ce
So,
qu'on prévoit faire dans les
talk
prochaines
about
années.
what we
Ben,
plan
avant
to
que je
do
vois
in
en
the years
détail, est-ce que
to
vous avez
come.
des
Before I
questions
go
un
into
peu sur
any
le
details, do you have
sur
any
le programme?
questions on the program per se?
Le programme ou le
Questions on the process of evaluation process or the program? I see nothing. And it's because I'm blind, so
Donc, ce qu'on prévoit faire en
what do you
2021
plan to
comme,
do in
comme
2021
rénovation pour le programme, on a,
as far as renovation
donc, premièrement, c'est
program?
on
First of
veut
all,
utiliser l'argent qui est dans la réserve de
we use the
330 000,
money
donc on
that
serait à
is in the
680
reserve,
000
and we
pour le
would go up
budget
to
de
680,000 for the 2021
Donc,
budget.
c'est sûr, il y a deux projets qui avaient été
There's two
reportés
projects
de cette
that
année pour
were
l'an
put
prochain.
off
Donc, il y avait un projet
to
à la
next year,
Gabrielle,
from this year,
de
the
rénovation,
arena Arthur
et aussi le
LeBlanc
parapet
for
du centre aquatique qu'on remet cette année.
energy improvement,
Donc,
350,000
justement,
pilot
à
project.
l'arena Arthur Leblanc, on veut
And
faire des
at the
améliorations
Arthur
énergétiques.
LeBlanc,
Le projet
we want
pilote aussi avec la
the
SCM.
pilot project.
Donc,
as
on a
said.
350 000 de
We have
prévu.
$350,000
On a la
planned for that.
réparation de la toiture au
And
centre
we
aquatique,
have
le
the
parapet,
house,
donc, pour
the fence at
146
the
000
aquatic center in the amount of $46,000.
Donc aussi, là, on a une unité
We also have
le Tectron, c'est l'unité de ventilation pour la
ventilation
piscine.
for
C'est
the swimming
très
pool.
énergivore comme
It
unité, donc
was
on veut l'améliorer pour économiser de
energy
l'énergie, puis
involved.
aussi
We
juste
want to save
ça fait quand même une dizaine
energy,
d'années que ça fonctionne, donc on veut
and it's been
le
operating
remettre un
for
peu à
quite
neuf,
a
donc
few
on aurait
years.
54 000
So we're at
pour ce projet-là. Il y a aussi
for
des
that
subventions
project.
qui sont
And
disponibles
also subsidies
de la province pour nous aider à payer des frais.
that comes from the
25% serait
province.
couvert pour
25% would be covered by the
le même
province.
principe aussi à l'hôtel de ville,
Same
on veut
principles
améliorer
for
l'énergie.
City Hall.
Puis
We
aussi
want
la
to
chaudière,
improve
quand même, on approche
the
15 ans de
energy, the
l'utilisation.
power.
On veut profiter aussi des
And
programmes
we're at
avec la province
15,000. We
pour
want to use the
améliorer
program from the
l'efficacité
province to
énergétique,
improve
puis
the
aussi
standards, the energy
remettre à
standard,
neuf
and
au système.
also
Pour
to
l'hôtel
put
de
our
ville.
system, renew
D'autres
our
améliorations
system,
énergétiques dans
and
d'autres bâtiments.
other power.
Donc, le budget, ici, juste une mention qu'on a
improvement.
reçue en 2020.
So this is something we received in
26 700 $ en
2020,
incitatif pour
26,000
des différentes
as an
améliorations
incentive
énergétiques dans nos bâtiments.
for a power improvement.
Donc, le budget pour 2021 est
The
de
budget for
680 000.
is $680,000.
Donc, ce qu'on prévoit, je vais présenter
what
aussi
we
ce qu'on prévoit faire en
What we plan to
2022.
do in 2022.
Donc, au marché de Dieppe, on prévoit faire
So,
des
at
améliorations
Dieppe, we plan
à l'éclairage,
to
puis aussi
improve
refaire des planchers.
The lighting and to repair
Au centre
the
des arts, on
floors.
veut faire
The art center.
amélioration
We
énergétique
want
aussi,
to
les lumières.
improve the
Il y a
power,
des revêtements
the
métalliques
lights.
sur le
So
bâtiment.
it means
à
a
l'extérieur.
metallic
Il y a aussi
roofing
des toitures
outside,
qu'on veut.
and
on
also
veut
the
refaire.
roof. We want to redo the roof.
On regarde à refaire la bande sur la surface
We
Saint-Ancien
want to do
en
the
2022.
in
Donc, elle commence
2020.
à
It's
avoir de l'âge à la
Saint-Anselme.
date de la construction.
It's starting to
Puis aussi à la maison des
get
jeunes, le
old,
système de
and the
ventilation
new
et
house,
des
the
nouvelles lumières.
ventilation system, and want to repair
335
fix
000
it,
$ en 2021.
$335,000 in 2021.
Excusez, c'est 2022. Là, je me trompe ici.
2022, I'm sorry.
Mais finalement, je vais vous présenter en
Finally, in
2023.
2023,
La maison des jeunes, on continuera un peu de
the
faire roulant, on
house
refait des
is
planchers.
new floors.
On mettrait des argents au
We
club
would
garçons et filles
put
pour
some
faire
money at the Boys and Girls Club
refaire la toiture,
to repair the roof,
changer des lumières, la
change
plomberie,
some
aussi
lights,
le plafond
plumbing,
suspendu au
inside
deuxième
plumbing,
étage qu'on refait
and
à neuf.
also some repairs on the second floor.
On avait d'autres travaux à l'arena Arthur
Some
Leblanc,
other
la
works at
toiture et aussi
Arthur LeBlanc
remplacement des
Arena. We
ventilateurs
want
sur
to
les surfaces de glace.
replace
Ça, ce serait
the
côté Saint-Ancien.
ventilators at the Saint-Anselme
Puis on
Arena.
referait le bordeaux de
And
bois
we
du
would
pavillon Rotary
redo,
pour 298 000 $.
for
Encore une fois, ça c'est 2020.
$96,000. So that's for
Donc, ça, c'est ce que je
$298,000.
propose pour les 3
This is what I'm
prochaines années
proposing for the next 3 years
pour le programme de rénovation des
for
bâtiments.
the building renovation program. Thank you very much, Mr. Como. Question? Councillor Godet. Your Worship, my question has to do with 2021. I know that different buildings, there's been power improvement with an incentive. Do we expect that there will be incentive as to the Arthur J. LeBlanc Arena? Spend $350,000.
Oui, le
Yes.
projet qu'on
The
applique
project
pour
that we're applying
Avec la
for.
FCM, le but, ce serait d'avoir
FCM
40% des frais seraient
40%
remboursables. Il y a aussi un
of
autre programme qui serait
refundable
une option avec
amount.
la province qui
An
paierait
option with the province
25%
that we
des
pay
frais.
25% of the money involved. Thank you.
Si
Thank you.
d'autres questions,
Is there anyone else with questions?
Madame de Boutier.
Mr. Moutier,
Merci, puis encore
thank
une fois,
you.
ça, c'est
Once
une
again,
information
it's more
pratiquement
an
quand
information. Maybe I misunderstood. When you talk about
condition des bâtiments,
the index for the condition of the building
350 000,
to invest
ça va
$350,000,
réduire, parce qu'on
it will
investit,
reduce because we're investing, we will reduce
prolonger
the extended cost,
le budget de rénovation que tu
the renovation budget that you are presenting for 2021.
parles de ces rénovations.
Do you talk about these renovations?
Oui.
That's what you're talking about? Yes. Or is it over and above? Renovation for the normal renovation of buildings and the two
Oui, c'est relié. C'est
interrelated? Yes.
en
Yes.
investissant dans
We invest
les actions
that
qu'on
in-
investit. Lorsqu'on investit, ça diminue
when we invest,
la ligne du graphique,
reduce
donc de
the
l'indice de
track, the
condition.
line.
Donc, si on fait rien,
The
on dit le
index of
pourcentage augmenterait, mais
condition, the
lorsque
percentage was
toutes les
improving. Was,
rénovations, ils sont dans le
getting
programme,
higher.
puis lorsqu'on les fait, ils sont enlevés, donc ils
when
diminuent
the
le pourcentage.
improvements are paid for, while the curve gets down, I had a hard time to follow.
Investir tant aussi longtemps qu'on
To
peut
invest as long, so we win environmentally. Why? But I was saying, how will it improve a building by replacing a light? To put a nice service, it should not have impact on the building per se.
Le programme de bâtiment
The building
inclut
program
l'extérieur du bâtiment, mais
includes the
il inclut aussi
outside of the
l'intérieur.
building,
Donc,
but it also
l'éclairage, c'est
includes
des
the
portes qu'il faut
inside,
remplacer
the lighting and
pour
different
environ
parts that have
10
to
à
be
15 ans. Puis
replaced
ensuite, il y a
every 10 or 15
donc, tous les
years.
éléments
So
sont
all
évalués. Il
the
y a la
elements
structure,
are
il y a la
evaluated.
toiture,
There's the structure, there's the
l'électricité,
roofing,
l'intérieur,
there's
tous
the
les systèmes mécaniques.
electricity inside,
Donc,
the
c'est tout
electricity outside.
partie
So
de la
everything
valeur
is
du
part and
bâtiment.
parcel of the building, the value of the building.
Madame Arsenault.
Ms. Arsenault,
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
thank you, Worship.
Je trouve que c'est formidable. Et la courbe que
I find that is fantastic because according to the curve,
relativement assez
so the building are relatively new. In 2020, we only have 1.40%. In 2030, we've only gone up by 2%. So as our building get older, if I understand correctly, that's where the curve will get higher in approximately 5 years.
rénovations se font.
So the renovation are being done relatively well because they're relatively new.
Oui, c'est ça. Lorsqu'on regarde
Yes.
à partir de 2030, les bâtiments
From
vont commencer à
2030,
avoir environ,
The building was
comme l'hôtel
start,
de ville, vont avoir 20
the
25
city
ans.
hall will
Donc,
be
ils vont
20,
commencer à avoir besoin
25
de
years
plus grosses
old.
rénovations comme des toitures
So
et
it will
d'autres choses qui sont un
require
peu plus dispendieuses.
more major renovations such as the roof and whatnot. Thank you.
Un peu comme le COVID, on essaie
It's a little bit like COVID. We try to
Oui.
flatten the curve. It's a little bit the same thing.
je vois pas d'autres questions
I see no more questions. Thank you, Mr. Kumo,
pour votre présentation.
for your presentation.
Un autre secteur.
Now we're going on to another sector. No? That's it?
Maintenant, on a le
Now we have the privilege of having Mr. Thériault, our money man,
nous montrer comment
to show us how all these pieces get together and find themselves essentially
partie intégrale de
integral part and parcel of our budget
2021.
for the year 2021.
On va essayer de résoudre ce puzzle-là.
We'll try to solve the puzzle.
Je vais commencer par le budget de
I'll start with the
J'ai fait
water and sewage operating budget. I did it last year for the first time. We start with the general and we finish by water and sewage. So we'll put them first this year. So
ici, on peut voir les
here we can see the present rate, the rates to propose to you.
à l'œil.
The first thing that I see, there's no increase requested for 2021.
C'est une première depuis
That's the first since 2008. We've always increased slightly, 1%, 2%, and this year we're recommending
Augmentation.
no increase.
On peut aussi voir dans
You can also see on the column at the right
tarif d'égout,
an increase of the sewerage, but the same amount for the water rate.
je vais l'expliquer au fur et
I
à
will
mesure.
explain as I go along.
Par exemple,
For
vous
instance,
rappelez bien, souvenez-vous de la présentation des
you
finances
remember
2019,
the 2019 presentation,
de 2,7 millions.
we had 2.7 million
Au niveau
deficit
de la
in water and
province,
sewage.
c'est un budget
Province-wide,
familial.
it's a utility budget. We can
Le déficit-là
put that up, that deficit over, spread it over 4 years. From 2021 to 2024, there's $75,000 the budget of water and sewage will have to
on a
absorb.
absorbé
So we just
675
absorbed 675,000 and we're not increasing
ça s'est fait avec plusieurs
the
facteurs.
sewage. That was done with several factors.
Général,
The general operating budget, we can transfer money to water and sewage.
proposé
So we proposed last year to transfer to 250,000 per year for the 4 years.
de dans tout département.
That budget
Donc, il y a
representing $1 million, the 250,000 will help us.
en deuxième lieu, il y a eu les
Secondly, there
le
was a cost deficit.
système a réduit de
The
750 000.
water was reduced from 58
150 000.
cents to 53. So we saved quite a bit of money.
L'augmentation de
But there's an increase of the water of mountain purchase everywhere. It's $60,000 that we save. It's a saving. Thirdly,
la
we
ville
have more units. The city is growing, so more money is coming in the city. And lastly,
il faut quand même aller piger environ
we have to go and get $90,000 from the reserve.
il y a 100
Its top is at 650,000. We're proposing to take $90,000 from that reserve to help to balance out the water and sewage budget. I told you more or less in one slide. Now let's go into more details if I may.
Donc, au niveau des sources de fonds,
So we have $13.6 million in the fund source.
maintenant,
The water and sewage rates are practically the same. $476 and $475 for the sewage. Pretty well the same. So 41% on both sides, water and sewage, so 5.5 million, or approximately close to 12 unit in the city of Dieppe.
le fonctionnement général,
We have the general operating fund, where we have 2 million to water and sewage, and we have other revenues. The other revenues, for instance,
des choses comme l'année passée qui se poursuivent,
there are things like last year, the rental
sont internes.
of a tower, water tour, and antenna,
Si on prend un cas expansion Dieppe,
the expansion Dieppe.
on a fait
They have made some borrowing in the past, and they're reimbursing phase one of aviation. But there are two revenues here that will come back later on, but I'll talk about it. First one I mentioned earlier
de la réserve de
is a transfer of $90,000 the reserve from the 400,000. The second one is
on
within the source. We are building access road, so we're cutting the woods to build the access road with that wood. So it's bringing us a revenue. This year, $1,000 in wood that we were able to save. We're talking about $50,000 that is budgeted for next year.
l'analyse des dépenses. Donc,
Analysis of expenses. How do we go from the budget 2021 to the budget for 2021? We start with 13.5 million last year in 2020, and then
les dépenses qui
I removed the expenditures that will not repeat this year, transfer to the reserve, $100,000 that was a surplus of 2018,
les ponctuels de 2020
and the punctual of 2020, that was 140,000. These are expenses that will not repeat themselves. So we have a basic 12.8 million of basic budget expenses. We have four categories of expenses.
transfert à la réserve.
When they transfer to the reserve,
Ponctuels,
so the punctual are the expenses that happens only once. It doesn't repeat them itself. 40,000 here.
2021,
The annuities of 2021
à la réserve, maintenant,
transferred to the reserve. As I explained,
eu de surplus.
we did not have a surplus, so we don't have that amount in the reserve.
Dépenses existantes. Donc,
and the existing expenses, the expenses that are there to without increasing the service, if you wish. And in the there's deficit $175,000 that's in there. More details in each category. The 35,000, we talk about the access road they were planning to make 400 meters at $35,000, but that is financed by the sale of wood, as I said earlier. A novelty. There's a $9,000 in Melanson. That's for the budget, the operation budget. Transfer to reserve, there's none. And lastly, existing business, 7.7 million. In detail, there's salaries, $96,000. That represents approximately 3%. It means that there's three things: salary, existing salary, but also new position. I'll go into more details at the next presentation. The general operation will. There's a position last year that was proposed, that was accepted. We made the mistake of putting it 100% in the general operation. We noticed that, and part of that salary should go to water and storage. So it's included in $96,000. The purchase of water, with a reduction of 5 cents with the purchase of water. We purchased 3 million cubic meter. So 3 million bring us to 150,000 in reduction. There's an increase of 5% budgeted compared to last year within the quantity of water that is used. We have to say that this year, the water, the purchase of water, the quantity increased. It's related to, but a lot of people were working at home. So it made it such that more water was used compared to last year, and the drought that we had compared to last year. So that's why we're budgeting a 5% increase for the quantity of water to be purchased in the city of Moncton. As to the operation capital, $69,000, and also the equipment replacement program that represents 5-6% increase compared to last year. And underneath, there's $90,000 for the operation of the debt, management of the debt service. There's two things. It came to council about a month ago. We refinanced at 1.3%. It was a loan that was there for 25 years. After 15 years, we renew it. We do it every 5 years, and we renewed it to a lower interest rate than the one that we had previously. So save money. And secondly, it is related to renewal. When we renew, we have to pay discount rate. It's 1% of the total amount. So out of 4.3 million, we talk about $40,000. But this year in 2021, there's a renewal for $1 million. It went from $30,000 to $10,000 discount. So savings of $30,000. The other costs are basically the same. An additional as the maintenance, lighting, heating, or these things, 35,000 with Transaqua. The units went up, and in Dieppe we have to pay more for Transaqua at $210 per unit. Administrative costs, well, we had high rates because of what happened in the past, and this is ended. So legal costs are not paid. That's a saving to 1,000. And lastly, as I said, $675,000. A deficit we have to pay for the next 4 years. By the way, you can stop me anytime if you have any questions or whatever it may be. Water and storage budget for 2021 and more global, we see with 13.7% salary is 3.07 million, increase of 96,000. The purchase of water, I said earlier,
Le traitement des eaux usées.
the water waste,
L'opération, on a augmenté
the capital of the operation increased 69,000 at 1
Le service de la dette,
service of the debt
réduction de 90 000.
reduction of $90,000.
Opération,
The operation of water and storage,
c'est une diminution
you
de
can see here a reduction of $106,000. Essentially,
dépenses ponctuelles.
these are punctual expenses on the 2020 budget that will not repeat in 2021. Valve were replaced, water conduct were purchased, but these expenses are one-time shot. We will not see them again next year. And lastly, the previous deficit, we observed 675,000 from the first year, an increase of $512,000 on our budget.
Là, je peux vous avouer que
I can admit that I'm not a graphist. It's not very nice what I show you, but it's just so you can capture the general idea how the water and storage operating budget interact with the other budget, whether it be the other reserve and the capital. We can see that the water and storage of $3.6 million essentially comes from the 11.2 million of the water and storage, 2 million from the general operating, 5.0 at 2.1, and it's at 2.0, 2.05. And that money, what do we do with it? 1.2 million that goes to the bottom at the capital to help the capital project. The Seedland represented 2 weeks ago, 5.7 million. That brings $100,000 loan and income from other sources, federal, provincial, or even from developers of $4.3 million on each side. We can see the reserve on the left, 600,000, and it's at the maximum and 5% of the budget for the previous year and 2.3 million with the capital budget. In both cases, you'll see more details on February 14th when we come in front of you to transfer. Maybe these amounts will be higher, especially the capital reserve. When all the projects that are underway that are not completed, we have to take that money and put them in the reserve for the, you'll see all of that on the 14th. There. Before I go to the 5-year plan, any question before we go to the 5-year plan? Before we go to the future, Ms. Leboutier, a small question for planning purpose. I'm sure that the money man thought about it. The strategy is to go get the money on the reserve that we have to maximize it. We expect to do that for the next 2 years. Imagine, no. The reason why I'm proposing to do it this year is because, yes, we have a deficit of $90,000. We'll use the reserve. But next year, we have a plan to have a surplus of $210,000. So the city of Moncton will be reduced, and we plan to reimburse the reserve at that time. Thank you. Ms. Arsenault, Your Worship, $70,000 that was in the reserve. We take out $135,000, then the deficit. How much money do we have left in the reserve? How can I say? That's what is budgeted. At the end of the year 2020, the reserve will be maximized about $650,000 in 2021. To balance the budget, we will take approximately $90,000 from it. That's what is planned. However, when we're in 2021, there may be surplus that we did not plan. that will make it that maybe we won't have to use the $90,000. There's a good chance we won't use it.
On va le.
So it's budgeted, doesn't mean we will use it necessarily. Thank you.
Si,
Thank you.
autre question?
Other question?
J'en vois pas, alors on continue avec
Okay, let's continue with the 5-year plan.
C'est la dernière diapositive.
It's my last slide on the issue for water and
Donc,
sewage.
on regarde une provision
We'll look at a forecast 5 years that include next year 2021 the military rate. It remains stable for 2021 and 2022. As I was telling Mr. Boutillier, will not increase.
avoir besoin.
We shouldn't have to in 2023. However, we plan an increase of $8.
Prévoit, je devrais dire.
We foresee,
Puis là, ben, on
we
prévoit
proposed it at that time, but for now we foresee another $8 in 2024, and it should remain stable for 2025. So two increase of $8 within the next 5 years. $8 is less than 1% increase.
le budget de fonctionnement, quant à lui, ben,
The operating budget
année, donc troisième
increases year after year. It goes from 13 million to 14.5. Capital budget 1.7 million next year, as
on regarde à peu près
it was presented. Then we look at 2 million per year.
donc 100 000
The borrowing 200, 300
petit emprunt.
small loans up to 2025. It'll be about 2 million the next 5 years. And it's mostly, we can see the result of the ratio
Les trois prochains
goes down quite a bit in the next 5 years, but by 2024, 2025, that's when the project
2004, 2004,
that we're in 2020, we will borrow for 20 years. They'll start, we will have paid them off, so we will benefit from them. Question from the councillors, Mr. Gadet.
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Par rapport
A question as to the water source.
pouvez voir sur les 5 prochaines années,
In the next 5 years, do we plan additional investment in that field,
on a fini avec le chemin.
or are we done with the access road?
Deux choses.
Well, two things, Councillor Gadet. The first thing is we maintain the maintenance of our water source to keep the classification with the environment, and we progress and we go along with some development of additional roads. As we are able to, we keep expanding the access. If we want to do some more exploration, we can do so.
D'investissement capital.
There's no capital investment per se. No, not at all. We have an agreement with a water purchase for the city of Moncton for a 20-year period. It goes fast. So we still have many years left. The reason I raised this question is within 5 years, we don't know what will happen with the river on the other side. I wonder that if by
Investir
cautions we should invest or get an investment
avec le gouvernement.
taken with the government to have access to these sources as in case of an emergency, especially for a human consumption. I don't know. It's something to consider because each year
Des messages,
we receive messages.
disons, c'est mitigé un peu, mais quand même, le lac vert peut nous poser des problèmes dans
The lake can present a problem if the
chose à considérer.
weather remains as it has been lately. Maybe we should look to see if we have an emergency money. Two things. I know the city of Moncton, through the 3 municipalities, are dealing with these problems. They're asking for money to deal with it. But I agree with you that our water source is probably a gold mine, if I can use that expression. Water will become something very important and something we have to maintain.
Mais pour que notre source
But
d'eau
for our water source to be operational,
c'est un plan de 3 ans.
it's a 3-year plan before it can be productive.
Cheminement assez long.
So it's quite a lengthy road to follow, and there's a question of integrating two type of water source in the network. That's the problem. The surface and underground water cannot supplement each other in the same water line. So it's all these challenges, but we have to keep maintaining our water source as a future potential, and one day I'm convinced that we'll need it. However, the city of Moncton is doing an excellent job to deal with the blue eagle problem, and they have solutions to deal with that problem.
Merci.
Thank you.
Je vois pas d'autres
I don't
questions.
see any other questions, so on that,
Est-ce que ça termine?
I think this.
Il y a encore.
No, there's still.
Oui, les tarifs, c'est ça. Juste avant que je passe aux tarifs,
Before I go on the rate,
cette diapositive-là nous
I've
permet,
talked a lot on this slide, but I forgot something.
ça vient d'entrer dans mon esprit tantôt. Au niveau de Transaqua,
As,
vous pouvez voir
as for Transaqua, you can see it on my screen, on your screen.
présentement est à
The
210
rate is at $210, so no increase
Cependant,
for
comme
that cost. However,
entendu la semaine dernière,
as you heard last
ils
week,
proposent une augmentation
they're proposing
2%, donc
an increase of
c'est
2%.
environ $4.
So it would be approximately $4 increase.
Ils ont
I
entendu
expect that they heard you
pas, mais
loud and clear.
il y en aura une.
But it could be that there will be a meeting that will be held at the end of November, if ever that is the case, and if there is an increase,
De notre côté,
which means that
on va aller devant le
for us, we'll go before you
15, le 9 de novembre pour faire
on
autoriser
November
autoriser les taux.
the 9th to authorize the rates, but then they'll come afterwards, maybe to come with an increase. So we'll have to go back before you afterwards
Ce nouveau
to
code-là.
authorize that new rate on December the 14th, if need be. If need be.
Là-dessus, je dirais qu'on a.
On that, I would say that
Discussion avec
we are pursuing the discussion with the Transaqua people, especially, and
il semblerait que les
it would seem that the discussion are not very civil and progressive.
Continue. Donc, tantôt, je vous ai démontré le tarif.
Here I showed you the unit rate, an increase of $8.
Maintenant, pour
Now,
ceux qui ont
what
30 heures
is it
d'abonnement,
for those who have the ICI,
commercial
institutional, commercial, and industrial?
en 2018,
In 2018,
ils ont
talking about Transaqua, they redefined what a unit was. A unit in 2018 was 277 cubic meter. It was reduced to 240 unit cubic per year. To make that transfer,
grosse augmentation
it was a huge increase rate-wise for the
on peut voir ici
counter.
le tarif en
You
2020.
can see the rate in 2020, 2021, 22 per unit remained the same, but because the equivalency of the number of units goes from 267 to 240, and will be 250 and then we reach the 240, and the rate will increase 365 to 381 next year, so an increase of 3.7%. Same thing in 2022, an increase of about 3.7%. And afterwards, future increases, well, they will be relative to the unit increase in 2023. It goes from 948 to 956, and the unit being now 240 cubic meter per year, but it increased by 0.8%. And the same thing for future years. And the same for 2024, stable in 2025. To give you a general idea of what I'm talking about, when I talk about the cubic per day represents, it went from 750 liter per day to 240 represents 350 liter per day.
Donc, c'est tout, M. le maire, pour
That's it.
les égouts.
For water and sewage.
On va continuer avec
So we'll continue with
le budget général.
the general operating budget.
Donc, le budget de fonctionnement général
The
2021.
general operating budget for 2021. We receive an increase of 0.75%, increase lower than previous year. We've received in the last 2 years 4.25% 2 years ago and 3.7% last year. This year, 0.75%. It hurts in that it's 1% represents $550,000. So if we compare ourselves to neighboring city, one received 1.8%, another one 1.7%. Well, we're behind by 1 and 2% as to these cities. So it does hurt us. 0.75%. Residential, we increased by 4%. That helped us a lot. There's a lot of units that are being built in Dieppe. But $16, $17 million in property tax for residential. Non-residential, they're the ones that hurt us more this year. They've reduced by 5% this year. Since residential 65% compared to 35% for non-residential commercial, that's how we arrive at 0%. The property tax, therefore, remain the same. That's what we're proposing. It's $80,000 or $90,000 that come in for the exchange or the contribution from the government. But to summarize, it's the commercial increase from last year that is increase here next year. That's when that amount will reduce, will go down. As for the budget, what I wanted to deal with, I want to tell you that the budget we're presenting tonight is based on a normal year. So, as if there was no pandemic at all. We did not mention water and sewage because it doesn't have an impact with what is happening, but generally speaking, it has an impact. But as we showed you this year, we're ready to expand our budget, compare if we're in the zone red, orange, yellow, or whatever. We're there to meet that challenge. We have less risk revenue than other municipalities, and we have more control, I could say. We will use to face the events that could happen in the next year. As for the amount of 59.7%, 90% is property tax. 1.2 million is the subsidy from the government, represent 2%, and we have the other revenue for 4%. The 4.8 million, we find the arena, the revenue from the arena, the building permit, the transfer payment, and so on and so forth. Even the provincial rate that we're receiving for the provincial highways, we talked earlier about outside the meeting, but we talk about the LSD that reimburse for the fire department services. So this is all part and parcel of the whole amount. As earlier, I will go through from 2020 to 2021. So 58.9 million, the transfer to reserve of 1.5 million and the punctual of 2022 come to a basic budget of 56.2 million.
Ce qui fait en sorte qu'on augmente
It makes it such we're increasing 59.7 million.
transfert à la réserve, c'est
Transfer to reserve 600,000 if we talk with surplus of 2 years ago of 2019.
plan financier.
According to our financial plan, we use it, we transfer to the reserve. So we're not taking it to balance our budget. It's a revenue of 600,000 and also an expenses. Expenditures of 600, the punctual of 21, we talk about 900,000 that is financed by the reserve. And I'll go through this later on. 1.1 million to the novelty, 21, especially Uniflex has a lot to do in the Duano house and the existing expenditures that increased by 900,000 salaries, operational expenses, and whatnot. In more details,
Pour les budgets, donc,
for the budget,
expliquer qu'on avait 1,5 million l'an passé.
I explained we had at 1.5 million last year that was budgeted and reserved to the transferred to the reserve. First three amounts, it represents a surplus for 2018, 400,000 went to finance Uniplex. $100,000 on the operating, and another 100,000 since it was the first one was maximized. The last $100,000 was sent to the reserve for capital expenditures. Now, lastly, we have $900,000 that should be sent to reserve. That's what we will see on December the 14th. The capital reserve. With that 900,000, that's the difference between the revenue we had last year compared to the expenditures. And there was a surplus that was budgeted to be sent into reserve, but mainly, well, last year, when we came before you, as I'm doing right now, we were planning some increase in the tax base, but we took the difference and we put it reserve. That is part and parcel of that 900,000. It would happen this year because we all received the figures from the province already. The province is asking us to send the figures 1 month earlier, but they did their work and they gave us the figure ahead of time. Nothing should change. We have the final figures. In 2021, 600,000, that is the surplus of 2019 that we plan to transfer to the operating reserve to keep it at its maximum at the top level. Now, $900,000, 800,000 is already money that is in reserve. So we plan to send in reserve at the end of 2020. But the 330,000 that we talk about for the building renovation, it's an amount in the reserve that is transferred to be used in 2021. And there's a 50,000 that is for a consultant with human resources, $38,000 is for installation. There is some equipment that has to be purchased. So it's a reality. We put in reserve in 2020, $30,000 approximately for that piece of equipment that would be purchased next year. As for the consultant, we're talking about a consultant to evaluate the future of the Centennial Arena, the future of the Centennial Arena. As for the sport field, $167,000. And these bridges have to be repaired. The bridge that link the multi-purpose bicycle trail. It's hard of access. We want to improve the access and extend it and to build it in a way that will more equipment can use it to for snow removal. There's reflection on the tennis court and the playground. And lastly, I don't remember the last
Deux
one.
avis. Ah oui.
Yes,
Juste
two,
avis pour le terrain de soccer. On a acheté
two
un
soccer shed.
l'aime bien. Il y a tout
And there's always a small wind in the Dover Road, so it's like a shadow.
on a acheté deux
We
autres.
propose to purchase
$58 000.
$58,000 for planning. Mr. Como talked about it earlier.
Frais de
And there's the expenses for the consultant and the AGM,
environ $38
$38,000 for a project.
énergétique avec la FCM.
That has to FCM and $20,000 for the waterfront park. We're starting to plan. As far as that goes, there's $150,000 that is in reserve for communication service. Two things: the signals in downtown and the website, the improvement of the website. And lastly, as for the expenses, there's the FCM, LGM efficiency. So it's coming back. But last year we put $75,000 in reserve. This is the second one, and the program was over for 3 years. We'll look at it next year again. It's for the water, the solar panel.
Au niveau des nouvelles dépenses, comme je disais tantôt,
As for the new expenses, as I was saying, most it's Uniplex.
on parle de 600 000
We talk about $600,000,
165 000
$165,000 for new position, 5 new positions starting in June. These positions were hired in June 2020. Maybe half, well, not hired, put in the budget. They were only hired later on, but they were put in the budget. They were put in the budget for half the year. So the second part of the year, it will be in 2021 because that will be 100%. It has an impact of $165,000, $75,000 for a new position starting in January. And we talk about cleaning attendant, and we also propose a second position, but starting only in 2022. We put it in the budget, but it will start only being used in 2022. Electricity and heating, as well as the water and sewage operating. These are the differential between having
bâtisse comme Uniplex versus
a building like Uniplex compared to Centennial. It will cost more in electricity, heating, and operational. When we talk about $380,000. I have a question before we go too far and forget it. Mr. Godet.
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
Thank you, Worship.
Par rapport aux 150 000
The $150,000 for communication, signals, and everything else. I raised, I believe, a few months ago
mon inquiétude,
my concern. I found that
j'avais un besoin de faire
we had a need to do some signage as we enter the trail so that people would know how to drive and how to respect the way of operating on the bicycle trail. I wish it was included in the 2021 budget, the creation of these kind of signage. I don't say at every entrance that we should have it, but education wise, some people drive fast, some people don't have any horn on their bicycles. There's a lot of things that are happening on the bicycle trail, dogs that are not tied up. I wish we would think about a number of signs and that they would indicate them on the bicycle trail. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Godet.
pris en considération sans aucun doute. Alors,
It will be considered without a doubt.
la présentation.
We continue with the presentation
au niveau des dépenses nouvelles,
as to the new expenses. We talk about human resources, $150,000 for new position.
de nouveaux
We talk about new position, but that were accepted in 2020 last year, and it was for the last part of the year. Now we're in 2020. It means 100% of that budget, of that amount, will hit us in the 2021. It's part of the $150,000 as well as the dwelling house, the student position. So we'll need more because there's operational that is part and parcel of that amount. I have to tell you, however, I have to make a correction. I know this afternoon while talking with the manager of recreation activities that the students, there's about a mistake for $30,000 that will be removed from that budget if I'll correct it and I'll present it to you at the next meeting. $50,000 as for the conversion of position. We're not talking about new position. They're laborer, auxiliary laborer, and they will be converted to full-time, but they don't have yet attained the full-time position by doing the conversion for retirement pension plan that will be improved. Statutory holidays. Secondly, we talk about 2 workers that will be promoted to supervisors. There's already 2 foremen, 2 are doing that job. We want to have a team of 4 supervisors as we have now. And lastly, there's a leader, a group leader that's proposed, but for the budget of 2021, what we're proposing is that there is also a fire chief position to be filled. It should not be filled in 2021. We would take that budget to finance the group leader, but by 2022, if the chief, the fire chief, we would use it with the budget of 2021. And lastly, for the new expenses, the other expenses, as I mentioned, we talk about the $250,000 that will be transferred over 4 years. It's 1 out of 4 years. For insurance purpose, we propose a new premium, a better coverage for pollution purpose, but the cyber security, the first is $10,000 and the second one $25,000, approximately $25,000. The next 2 items, as you can see, they cancel each other, but we've talked about them last week when the RCMP service for Kodiak came to discuss. They've reduced, if I back up and I put myself, their budget was reduced by $135,000, but the fire service will increase by $135,000 for the dispatcher service. The RCMP service is proposing to invoice the 3 municipalities, and our share is $135,000. For us, it's a transfer of a budget transfer. Now, the increase on existing expenses, what is happening right now, without any changes in other services. $245,000 for salaries, so it's mostly due for normal increase of salaries, so about 1.5%. External commission increased by 410, minus the 135 that I said last year, accounted for in 2 different type of expenses. The first one, 135, the negative 135,000 RCMP, it's a novelty. But as to their real expenses, we had an increase of 270,000 minus the 135. So that's why in the 410,000, we find the RCMP. But I'll come back because in 2 slides, I have them in more detail.
Pour les 3 prochains qui s'en viennent,
For the next 3, they're coming, the operation, the replacement of equipment, and the service of the debt service.
redire, si on veut,
I will repeat about the financial plan. The financial plan,
le
we
25
plan 25% of the total budget
ces 3 items-là.
for these 3 items.
Ces 3 items
And when I talk about the 3 items, it's all related to the assets that we own.
à même
We'll pay
avec l'argent du
with the
budget opérationnel.
money from the operational budget. So
On peut voir que
we can see
grosse diminution du service de la dette de
that
550
the $550,000 for the service of the debt is transferred to the operation capital
remplacement.
and also the replacement of equipment.
3 items-là demeurent
These 3 items
25%.
remain at 25% of the budget
Au niveau du
amount.
service de la dette,
As for the debt service, what went down, 50,000,
des raisons qui
is a loan that is matured.
Et là, on parle
It came to maturity, and we're talking
passé. Donc, on avait fait un emprunt de
15 years ago, we borrowed 7.8 million. That is
6,8 millions
at the end.
Boulevard Dieppe, 5
And the heavy part of it was for Boulevard Dieppe and also the Dover Cell and the land and the Dover Park.
500 000
$500,000. So these are the projects at the time for which we borrowed $7.8 million over 15 years. As for the water costs now, I mentioned $250,000. There's, however, for many years now, we always take that amount of $50,000. We keep it, which means it's $300,000 that is transferred from a general to water and sewage. The increase of $80,000 for snow removal. 2 things here. We talk about the repair of equipment or equipment repair. Every year they get older, equipment, and we always go beyond the budget that we have. And here we want to reflect there's an increase as for the contract, the snow removal contract, $75,000 for property tax. More and more we acquire property. It's normal. With the transfer expansion that we did last year, we got rid of land. We acquired a piece of land that was subdivided and it had higher taxes. It cost us a little bit more. And generally speaking, even the property that we own, there's been increases higher than the reality. We talk only about the property tax that we pay to the province. 50,000 for the program. August the 15th, we're bona fide it. Present to the site in music by $40,000 to increase it and Magazine Show approximately $10,000. I don't remember the words, but I know it has to do with the scene, the backstop of the scene, something like that. Mrs. Cormier would have more details if you should have questions on this. As for the tax on the housing, lodging, I have a blank. The 3%, I have a blank. But that amount last year, we evaluated it at $300,000. And finally, what we know, there's been a decrease. We had to reflect it, but that is an income and an expenditures. And lastly, the operation expenses, heating and these things. Now as for the fund distribution. Any questions from the councillors? I don't see any lights. So we'll go on to the next step. Distribution of funds. C'était
Ah, mis ma voix, c'est bon ça. Au niveau du salaire, donc,
salary,
augmentation de 670
an
000
increase of $670,000,
postes,
combination of new position and annual increase, external commission, an increase of $275,000. The water cost, $300,000 increase, operation and the service of the debt. You can see the increase and the reduction
s'égalise pratiquement.
are equal or balance out. As for the reserve last year, we had a transfer of 1.5, it reduced to 600,000, so 900 reduction, and the other expenses, operation expenses that increased 415,000. So a lot of these amounts have to do with Uniplex
Au niveau de opérationnel.
for operational expenses.
Bon, comme que je vous ai mentionné tantôt,
As I mentioned earlier, I'll go into more detail for external commission. The increase was 275,000.
au niveau du service
As for the RCMP service, we talked an increase of 140,000. In reality,
180 000,
it's 280,000. That was reduced to 140,000.
Kodiak Transport,
So Kodiak Transo, it's a budget that balanced out quite well. It's 4 million.
mentionné tantôt,
I did not mention it
recevoir
earlier, and I just noticed it.
quand même des ponctuels de ce niveau,
I have some
60 000
real of $60,000, but if we look at the line at the bottom,
diminution de 60 000.
a reduction of 60,000.
Cherché tantôt, là, mais
So this escaped me earlier,
contrebalance, mais
but it
il y a un
counterbalanced itself. There's a
au niveau des
reality
l'accessibilité des agents.
as to the accessibility of the stops, something that Mr. Richard is proposing to do. We take the reduction of adapted
Au budget TCC,
travel to budget it this year, and next year it should increase again.
l'expansion Dieppe,
Expansion, yep.
Prochaine
Before we go
diapo,
to the
Madame.
next slide, Mr. Boutier
Oui, merci.
has a question. Thank you, Your Worship. It's just,
Intéressé de savoir quelle option
I'd like to know what option we should have chosen for Kodiak Transpo. Was it the third one? We thought, and the discussions are going on today. It's still the same budget, but they talk about having 70% of the service. So we'll come back with the final details. But discussions are going on.
On continue.
Okay, let's continue.
au niveau des déchets solides, il y a une augmentation
As for solid waste, there's an increase of 135,000. Solid waste, two amounts.
ramassage des déchets, ainsi
The pickup, the
que
collection of garbage,
donc,
and the treatment, the processing. This summer, the Faro contract was more expensive than previous. That's where the increase in 135,000 is found.
140 000,
And we said 140,000. Disinfectation commission, $130,000.
123 000,
$120,000. There's a reorganization at that level that is being proposed. Capitol Theater, we mentioned earlier, so we see it here. $75,000, same amount as last year. And lastly, as we said, the adapted travel is
plus que c'est
for this year. We're confident that the cost should not be as high as previous year, but we're planning that amount for next year. Mr. Gadet,
Soit suivi de Madame Arsenault.
followed by Ms. Hesnell. Thank you, Your Worship. It has to do with the disinfectation commission. They've done an excellent job this year.
Lors d'une réunion de la commission,
During a meeting of the commission, Mr. Louis Lapierre, who was a volunteer, no relationship.
d'ailleurs, j'aimerais mentionner
I would like to mention that Mr. Lapierre has
comme bénévole au niveau de
done about 40 years as a volunteer, and he completed his mandate this year. We should congratulate him for the time that he's given. People think that it's only an event of 2 or 3 months, but the preparation
l'année fiscale,
each financial year, the students, the purchase of material that are quite hazardous in nature. He supervised the whole thing. So we should congratulate him and honor him for the job he did. But my question, as for the disinfectation during the request for budget, he talked about additional costs. Would like to know if our participation of 30,000 covered these expenses. Do we meet his demand or was it set aside? Yes, Councillor Gadet, the year 2021 does not have a major impact in the budget of that commission, but it's 2022 that the integration will be done. So we're completing the document to make the transfer and to deal with the present structure of the commission. So it's mostly 2022 where we will see an impact. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Arsenault.
Ms. Arsenault?
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
Thank you, Worship. $75,000.
Le théâtre Capitole, je croyais qu'on...
Capitol Theater. I thought we had discussed that over. I know that an agreement is being discussed, as Ms. Cormier mentioned it earlier. There is a tentative agreement that is on the table. It will be brought to the City Council and it's still in the budget for 2021.
Alors, on passe
À mon chef-d'œuvre ici. Là.
le chef-d'œuvre numéro 2.
Donc, on peut voir.
Vas-y, Picasso.
Il va. On peut voir que le budget de
You can
fonctionnement.
see that the operating budget, 59.7 million, how it interacts with the others. So we have property tax of 53.7 and a resource of 4.2 million plus the reserve that makes 59.7 million, and afterwards directed towards the operating of water storage, 25 million, and the capital budget 5.4 million to help finance the project, total of 14.6 million. So 1.9 million of loan and the other source of financing between the federal and provincial governments. On the left side, we can see that the operating is maximized at 8.8 million and the capital on the right side is at 9.6 million. And on December the 14th, it will have evolved, in my opinion, with the work that I've explained earlier. We'll have a better idea of the capital expenses when we present it on December the 14th. So, calculator 1.6295 for the tax for a house for a fourth year in a row. No increase. Yes, thank you. 2018, that we had 1.6295. Fourth consecutive year. Steady budget rate. The average of houses, if we take the average of $200,000, we talk about property tax of $3,200 and a cost per day of $9 per day, cost-wise. And it's the same budget by service. So I always present it as such to see the example, the budget, the police 10%, fire 11%, transportation 8.4%, recreation 15.2%, building, and on the left hand side on the top we can see it's 25%. So here, as we were able to see the financial service reduced by $500,000
Si on
and
veut
we'll take the 500,000 you wish to stay within the 25% total budget. I'd like to mention it, and I'll do it again.
Un des services en
One of the service where we spend the most is the
culture, loisirs et vie communautaire.
future leisure and community living, and it reflects a lot
Et
our community and our
des
desire
communautaires,
to have community development.
c'est
So
important de signaler.
it's important to mention it.
C'est une des choses qui attire.
That's one of the things that attract people to establish here in India.
Maintenant, en dernier lieu,
Last,
je peux tourner.
Dans le quinquennal.
Ça en vient.
5-year plan is coming.
Et la dernière.
The last.
Donc,
So
au tout haut de tableau ici, on peut voir l'escalade.
on top, we can see 0.75% for 2021, the rate, and then 2022 to 2024, 5. We go in a more cautious manner. We will remain under the 2%. We hope it'll be higher. We hope, as you can see, but for the time being, we established at 1.5, 1.25, 1%. It go down, absolute wise, the same figure, but because the figure gets bigger, the amount we propose no increase for the next 5 years. However, as you can see on the third line, if the criteria remains the same as we know them today, and with the hypotheses of the financial rate during the next few years, we see a deficit appear of approximately $7 million. We're okay for this year. Next year, 200,000. You can balance it out. But by 2023, 24, 25, the figure is slightly bigger. To face this, and these are decision we'll make in due time. There's several solutions. We talk about the financial. We'll correct it by itself. We can reduce the costs. Then what do we reduce? Is it the service that will be reduced? We're not there yet. It's a possibility. Thirdly, financial plan. We have a financial plan that is very aggressive and very fruitful. We can see the ratio go down, and we can pay from the general operating, but it's the 25% too much. If we reduce the 25%, then we'll borrow more. If we borrow more, then we'll pay more interest. So it's a small vicious circle, if you wish, but it can hatch, eventually it will cost more in years to come, but that's a possibility. So I'm presenting it this way. We're not ready to make a decision, any decision, but there's a lot of other factors, even outside this, that is outside our control, but the deficit could disappear. It's just to wake you up that we have challenges that are forthcoming, but there are solutions for these challenges, and we have to add also that it's not the first time when we submit a budget over a 5-year period, we see the potential of a deficit showing up at a given time in the 5 years. They've always been avoided based on the growth or wise decisions were made by our administrators in the municipal council. We take the example of what is happening with COVID and the impact it's had on assessment and evaluation based on the year that essentially last year, as far as building permit, it was a record, and it does not reflect itself on the evaluation that were done by the province because some businesses are having a hard time, and it created that situation. I dare to believe that the good sense will come back later on when we're done fighting with COVID-19.
Et pour terminer, donc, c'est juste un
And
aperçu
this is an
de
overview
mobilisation que vous avez déjà
of capital budget that was presented to you. 60 to 11, so it varies.
les emprunts
The
financiers
loans, 1.5 million per year,
5 millions sur
or an average of 4.5 million over 3 years.
l'endettement, lui,
And the debt ratio, as we can see, reduces to full
2025
by 2025. It could be at 10.9% if we keep the cap.
2026,
For 2026,
voyez pas sur sa
you don't see it on the chart on the table, but
Je sais qu'il y a un emprunt
I've seen it, and I know the loan will disappear in 2025, so in 2026, it would be under the 10%.
et un peu la cible qu'on est
That's the target that we
autour du 10.
established to be under the 10%
Ça conclut
debt level. This concludes my presentation. Is there any further questions before
cette présentation.
we finish this presentation and we go on to normal items for the regular meeting of council?
Sinon, moi,
If not,
ici, j'aimerais quand même de
I would like to thank you,
évidemment
Stéphane Thériault, as Director of Finance for the municipality, and the whole staff,
pas juste cadre, mais tous les employés
all the employees of the city
de la ville, un succès.
who have made a success of the city. Thank you very much.
Hélène, tout ça
That
étant dit,
brings us, all of that being said,
de retour à notre
back to our agenda and
à l'item
item
9, qui est l'adoption
9,
du procès-verbal
adoption
du 13 octobre,
of
proposé par le
the
conseiller
council,
approuvé
moved by Councillor Cormier, seconded by Councillor Arsenault, that the minutes be adopted.
procès-verbal de la réunion du 13
The meeting of October the 13th. Question?
Aucune question?
No question. All those in favor say aye.
Contraire,
And reminded nay.
la résolution est adoptée.
So carried.
Le procès-verbal est adopté de la réunion du
The
13
minutes for October the 13th is carried. This brings us to 10. Administration requests for financial assistance.
Non, ça.
Your worship, good evening, everyone. Here you have in front of you an application from the Lebanese Association for $500 that request, as it mentioned, it meets all the criteria as to the policies that exist. But I thought wise to bring you this application for your consideration because of the reason is to help the people. The explosion that happened in Lebanese is for your consideration, and to see if there is an opening to accept such a request, such a demand for the reading of the resolution. Ms. Arsenault.
Avec plaisir, monsieur.
With pleasure, Your Worship, that Council grant a financial contribution, the amount of $500 to the Moncton Lebanese Association,
J'autorise
and authorize that this expenditure be defrayed from account 1-2-20-19-2590,
budget
General Operating Budget Administration,
pour
other. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councilor Arsenault, seconded by Councilor Thibodeau. Other question? All those in favor, no question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Carried as presented. Next resolution, appointment. 10.2.1
Autorité policière régionale de Kodiak.
Regional Kodiak RCMP with the departure of Monsieur Alla.
Poste ouvert.
It leaves the position open for the reading of the resolution.
Monsieur Godette,
Mr. Gadet,
Que le Conseil
the
nomme
council
Maire
appoint
Yvon Lapierre à titre
Mayor Yvon Lapierre as member replacing former councillor Daniel Alain
sur l'autorité policière
on the Kodiak Regional Policing Authority for a term ending on May the 10th, 2021. I so move.
Monsieur Godette.
Move by Councilor Gadet, seconded by Councilor Guido. On the question,
Voulez-vous que je me retire?
you want me to withdraw conflict of interest?
Alors, ceux qui sont en faveur de
All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded nay.
Merci.
Thank you.
Je crois.
I think
10.3,
10.3 planning and development.
Monsieur Mélenchon.
Monsieur Melanson, this is a rezoning request. We've been asked to set a date for public hearing on November 3rd here at City Hall. A land that is located on on the Melanson side of the road. We ask also that the PAC committee take a position and a notice on this request, and that they consider the delay as planned until December 2020 for the reading of the resolution. Councillor Leblanc.
Excusez-moi.
Sorry, there.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
To your worship, that council schedule a public hearing on November 23rd, 2020 at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Dieppe City Hall to hear objections with regards to a proposed amendment to the zoning map under bylaws Z-10 2017 to allow for the development of row houses on the land identified under PID 70307313. That council requests the written views of the Planning Advisory Committee and extend the deadline pursuant to Section 110.3 of the Community Planning Act to December 16, 2020. So moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Cormier. On the question,
Question, Madame Leboutier.
Mr. Boutier.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le
Yes,
Maire.
thank you, Worship.
Dans le rapport préliminaire,
In the preliminary report,
phase 1, phase 2.
phase 1, phase 2, and then
Oui, là, j'avais vu.
I just found
Puis
it.
après, on
And then
fait référence à une phase 3.
we refer to phase 3.
On n'a aucun détail qu'est-ce qui va être.
We have no details of what phase 3 will be. Mr. Fournette is with
Bonsoir,
us.
Monsieur le Maire, membre du Conseil.
Worship, members of council.
Je pense que c'est un
believe
erratum. Je pense que c'est une erreur.
that
C'est
it's a
qu'au
mistake.
début, on avait
At the
une
beginning,
position qui était pour 3 bâtiments.
We had a position for
Puis,
3 buildings.
suite à la
And,
consultation là, avec le
following
développeur en
the
question,
consultation
puis
with
aussi
the
le ministère de
developer
l'Environnement,
and the
étant donné la
Department of the
présence là,
Environment,
du ruisseau qui est à l'arrière,
and
il est passé de 3 bâtiments à 2
it went
bâtiments.
from
Donc,
3
je pense que
buildings
c'est
to
une
2
erreur. Je
buildings.
pourrais
So I
valider
think
avec
it's a
mon
mistake. I
collègue
can
Alexandre Girard demain,
consult
puis vous
with
revenir
my
là, avec la
colleague
réponse, mais
Gerard
ça sera
tomorrow and come
corrigé
back with an answer,
si
but
c'est
it will
le
be
cas
corrected
avant
if
l'audience
it's
publique.
the case before the public hearing.
Merci.
Thank you.
Pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer.
Continue.
We can continue.
OK. Alors, si vous avez répondu à votre question, on n'a pas besoin de l'entendre.
No.
OK. Alors, ceci étant dit, ceux qui sont en faveur.
We've said all those in favor of the resolution say aye. Contrary minded nay. Carried as presented. And this brings us to bylaws with bylaw C11-2020, a bylaw relating to traffic and parking in the city of Dieppe by title only in first and second reading. We'll do it one after the other. Monsieur Benito, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Arrêté numéro C.
Bylaw number C-1, bracket 1-2020, a bylaw relating to traffic and parking in the city of Dieppe.
Je vous le propose,
I so move, Your Worship, in first reading by title only. Moved by Councillor Brido, seconded by Councillor Leboutier. On the question, no question, all those in favor say aye. Reminded nay. Carried as presented, and will proceed with the second reading, once again by title only. Mr. Brido,
arrêté numéro C.
bylaw number C-1 bracket 1-2020,
Portant sur
a bylaw relating to traffic and parking in the city of Dieppe.
Je vous le propose,
I so move, Your Worship, in second reading. Moved by Councillor Brido, seconded by Councillor Leboutier, second reading by, on the question, Mr. Leblanc.
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
Your Worship,
La question était
the
sur
question
11 rue
was
Belleforêt.
Article 11, Rue Belleforêt. I see we change
Le stationnement interdit de 300 mètres.
the prohibited parking for 300
Est-ce qu'on peut regarder
millimeters, and we look to make sure that
la sécurité se maintient à 90
the safety is maintained at 90 meters?
en fin de semaine?
Was not the case on the weekend. So, yeah, we'll make sure with the team that it meets the expectation of what the intentions were. 90 meters go beyond the Rue des Arabes, and one that hook up to the Belleforêt. I wouldn't want to miss it. It'd be too late after the third reading. So I'll do a follow-up. No more question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Carried as presented. And that completes the list, except for the notice of motion. None was presented. And item 13, the favorite of everyone's favorite, inquiries and announcements from the councillors. And I believe I start on my left with Mr. Boutier. There's no Monsieur Alain, so
C'est pas moi qui le remplace.
I don't replace him. Thank you, Your Worship.
J'aimerais avoir,
I
est-ce
would
qu'on a
like
eu
to
le
see
compte rendu ou est-ce
if
que
we
c'est
have
pour la
the minutes
circulation
for the
bord Dieppe,
traffic at Dieppe Boulevard
dans le coin de
and the
l'Ultramar?
street at the corner of Lakeburn.
Ça marche?
Yes, the service did the compilation of the data last week. I'm waiting for the expenses, the report from Ms. Spencer to share it with the municipal council. But the data were accumulated and we're waiting for the final report. Thank you.
Aussi,
Also,
plainte, ben,
I received a complaint.
j'avais reçu aussi, là.
Well,
Pour la rue, on a
or
envoyé des photos.
we sent some photographs.
Est-ce qu'on peut avoir
I don't know if
un sommaire ou est-ce qu'on est
we
rendu
could have a summary where we're at for Louis and Amiro.
installé marche piéton?
We installed a
Piéton, puis
a
installer d'autres photos. Puis c'est
pedestrian crosswalk.
même sortir maintenant, il y a un poteau électrique.
Apparently, there is an electric post
Je me demandais s'il y avait eu
to help with the crossing. I was wondering if there was any evolution. There was a follow-up, Mr. Boutier. So what we did is there was the addition of one post. It's the same number of posts, and we'll keep on looking at that crosswalk, that intersection in the morning on Amiro. It's more complicated to have access to a left-hand turn, but we noticed that it's the same post. Upon construction, they were yellow, and there was a site that was under construction. I don't know if Ms. Spencer has anything to add, but that's what I was told.
pour revenir, ça fait
And to
qu'on a
come
regardé,
back,
puis c'est
so we've looked, and it's safe and everything. Okay. Ms. Spencer, you just joined us. You heard the question.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le
Yes,
Maire.
thank you, Your Worship. So, as
Mélenchon
Mr. Melanson mentioned, is the same amount of electric post, but there's a small post pole with a meter for electricity to measure the current, it's a small, about 3 feet
qui a été ajouté.
high that was added.
L'idéal, c'est peut-être
What
installer
we
des
consider is
lumières
to
pour
paint
les
a
véhicules.
stop line for the vehicle. When they stop at that line, they'll be able to see what is coming up traffic wise. If you go too far, there's a lot of poles. So that was the situation before, except for the small poles that has the electrical meter on it.
pour
Merci.
être
Thank you.
Et sur ça, quand
And
Mme
on
Spencer
that,
disait
since Miss Spencer is
qu'en
online,
publicité, il y avait
I would
un
like
bel
to
article dans le
congratulate
journal
her. There
justement
was
de
a
l'Acadie
nice
Nouvelle.
article on l'Acadie
Puis,
Nouvelle
même
about
rapporteur
her.
par
Congratulations.
une autre visite
It's an honor for her and another asset for the city of Dieppe. Miss Spencer.
Merci.
C'est tout pour moi.
Merci.
Thank you. That's all for
Puis,
me. Thank you.
oui, il y a eu l'article dans l'Acadie Nouvelle, mais il y a aussi
There was the article in l'Acadie Nouvelle, but there was also an article on Radio Canada.
Ça fait grand news. Je pense pas que c'était l'Acadie Nouvelle, je pense que
C'était
c'était sur
Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada.
It was Radio Canada, I think.
J'ai dit à
We have
Radio-Canada.
to give credit to Radio Canada,
Madame Spencer.
but especially credit to Miss Spencer and the way that she represented us well,
Présente bien les
and she represents engineers in general. So,
Arsenault.
Ms. Arsenault,
Merci, Monsieur le
thank
maire.
you, worship.
Je voulais juste signaler que
I just want to mention
la section où ce que GF,
that
GF
the section where Jeff Bourgeois meets Amiro, there was another drain that was placed on the left side. The drain was put there for the water that was accumulating and freezing in the winter. I want to thank the city of Dieppe for placing one. There's already one that was on the right side. Now we have one on the left and one on the right. So it should work out for this winter. One other thing, the work was done on Fox Creek Street. That seems to be completed. And the Transaqua, the building, if you notice, the roof is there. And frankly, it looks good also. It's a building, we call a pump station, a pump station. It looks good. I want to know, some work are going on Natalie Street and Dieppe Boulevard. What is the project going on? The ground has been lifted. There's some activities going on. I see that the permit is allowed, then we can share the information with you. The other thing, could Miss Spencer give me more details on the work that was done on the Fox Creek Aboiteau?
Bonsoir.
Good evening again.
Donc, bonjour, Madame la conseillère.
Miss Councillor, the Department of Transportation Infrastructure, from what we were able to understand, and they did some realignment, and they put a pipe inside the existing pipe. One pipe was completely full, and they did some work on the dike. They did it in forecast of the heavy rain, and they noticed after the rain fall, they noticed that there were things to be added, but the dike is working very well. So it will prevent flooding for some 200 houses in that vicinity. A huge improvement. Well, it's a short-term solution. Long-term solution
Résultant de la lettre qu'on a envoyée à la
coming from the province that we send to the province concerning the potential of flooding if they did not act on the dike that belongs to the province. They reacted well. For the time being, temporary solution, but they will bring a permanent solution. Probably that is that is getting worse if it's not looked after. I'm very proud that something was done.
Je crois
And
pas que
also,
dans
I
le
think
Nord,
since we're
un Halloween
yellow,
à Dieppe.
are we going to have a Halloween in Dieppe? Yes, we'll follow the guideline from public health. It's allowed to go door to door. Cautions are in order, and people in each house have the option of offering candies or not offer them, and that's what is part of our dynamic during the pandemic. It's up to the people to decide if they want to offer candy, and people can go door to door if they so wish. Thank you.
Merci,
Thank you,
Thibodeau.
Monsieur Thibodeau.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Your
La
Worship.
question que j'avais vient
The only
d'être
question I
répondue.
had was just answered the same one as Mr. Snow
Au sujet de la Halloween.
about the Halloween. I can add that it's they're allowed to go door to door until 9 o'clock Saturday night.
Bien, Monsieur Leblanc.
Monsieur Leblanc, Mr. LeBlanc.
Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Question, commentaire.
Question, comment.
Commencer. Moi aussi, j'aimerais féliciter
I'd like to congratulate
l'administration et toute la municipalité
the administration, the whole municipality,
pour l'information reçue
for the information received during the budgetary process. But with that,
Un point de vraiment déçu, c'est de voir
one thing that disappoints me is to see on the long
le
term
relancement du sentier du chemin Fox
the extension of Fox Creek Road does not appear in the next 5 years.
2 ans à peu près. Il semble avoir
About 2 years ago, there seemed to be an interest
un intérêt autour de la table du conseil
around the council table
sentier continue jusqu'en
to see the
Mélenchon.
trail that would continue up to Mélenchon Road, but we have more and more residences
La section
building up on Belforêt. The traffic accumulates on Fox Creek Road. More people are walking, and it's getting more and more dangerous to walk there, and to see that it doesn't appear on the project for the next 5 years. I'm very disappointed to see that it does not show up. I wonder if there's interest or appetite to revisit it and to see if we could not integrate it or put it somewhere.
Si, on va prendre note.
Thank you. We'll make note of it, Monsieur Blanchard.
Dans le cadre, évidemment, dans le cadre des prochaines années, de toute évidence,
Within the next few years, obviously, as you mentioned,
révision pour l'année prochaine.
it's not in the forecast for next year, so maybe we could make a study.
À différents temps de la journée.
On perd au-delà de 1 million. Mais on en prend note.
We'll make note of it.
C'est tout?
That's it.
Merci.
Thank you.
Monsieur Brideau.
Monsieur Brideau,
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
thank you, Your Worship.
Pas grand-chose à
I don't have much to mention tonight,
ici, la
if
compagnie
not to congratulate the company that
d'emplacement du
did the job
centenaire.
on the Centennial Arena. The work is done. The fences were removed today. It's a nice property. It's a matter to see what the future holds for us. I've been asked the question by residents, what are you going to do with the property? Nothing, no decision has been made. There's a lot of ideas flying around, but, well, that's it. Thank you.
Dire que les idées coûtent pas cher.
Was to say that ideas don't cost much. We just hired a consultant, it's going to cost a lot,
Ça nous,
but at least
permettra
it will allow us to
d'alternatives.
look at different alternatives. I think that generally speaking,
Je pense qu'il y a un consensus que
there is a consensus that when we look
rectangle à partir de
at the rectangular from Centenaire up to Mathieu Martin School,
un bel espace communautaire de
we have a nice community space from one end
qui nous sert très
to the other of the community that serves us very well, especially with the event sites and the Uniplex. I think that it will be hard not to keep that property and to find usefulness, community usefulness, the council will decide that there will be recommendations that will be made, and
Une décision du
it will
conseil.
be a decision from the council.
On en a parlé un petit peu plus tôt,
We talked about it earlier
réunion ce soir.
during the meeting tonight.
Le fait que Dieppe est une ville
The fact that Dieppe
ouverte sur sa communauté,
is a city that is open on its community, it
ça nous donne des
serves us well, and it gives us good result, and it make our community very viable financially, as we saw one more time this year. It will be hard to
de l'aspect communautaire.
get away from the community aspect of that property. The time to for decision will come later on, but
C'est comme mon opinion peut valoir.
for what my opinion is worth. That's it, Monsieur Brideau. Monsieur Cormier,
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
thank you, Your Worship.
Féliciter
I'd like to congratulate Josiane Como for her victory at La Voix. At the last public, we had our 4 minutes. We won the semifinals, but now it's official. She won. She's a winner, and I'd like to say those who will go door to door and pick the candies to be very cautious. Should have the same number of youth following the Halloween as we had on Halloween night. With the thing that we have a baby boom, so it could be
Plusieurs enfants additionnels à s'ajouter.
a lot more additional children for the following year. Thank you, Your Worship, Monsieur Vedette. 3 points. First one has to do with the special garbage collection that we had this fall. I would like to suggest that there seems to be confusion on what is to be collected and what is not. Receive 2 email as to what is left on the side of the street. It might be an idea to be able to use the app Meg to have a page to define exactly what are the things that will be collected, because people don't seem to go on the website. I would encourage Dieppe Mag to act on it. Secondly, a citizen asked me some question about the policy on snow removal of the streets. I'm waiting for an answer. I've yet to receive anything. And my last point is I just heard this week that the radiothon for Tree of Hope will be canceled this year. The funds will be raised during the month of November. The only thing that I would like to insist on is that I made a donation for Councillor Thibodeau to shave his head. I hope it won't fall out, and if he's not at his $2,000, please, if there's a way, maybe we can shave his head on the night of the council meeting. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning the sacrifice. I hope that it will be a tradition within the city council. Since I started it last year, I hope that every member for future council, when comes the time for radiothon, from one after the other, that Councillor. Sorry, we missed that. On that, once again, I don't want to repeat everything that the members said, but especially for Halloween night, please. For the people who will travel on our street, be careful. And similarly, I've received the invoice, not Bell, but for Josiane vote. I'm convinced that people have received their invoices by text. Once again, congratulations. And there's no doubt that a young woman from Dieppe who will be successful, notwithstanding where she decides to go. On that, good evening, everyone. Once again, thanks to the staff for preparing the budget for 2021. Good night.